Hello, I'm Colin Anderson, and you're listening to Best of Belfast. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you and make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and meet those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to set a trap for fools, and watch the things you give your life to broken, and stoop and build them up again with worn out tools, if you can make a heap of all your winnings on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose, and start again from your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and hold on when there is nothing in you except the will that says to you, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you and none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute of 60 seconds worth of distance run, then yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
Unbelievable.
So sorry, I forgot some of it. It's hard just when you hit that.
Oh man,
I wasn't expecting that one.
But it's a long poem, you know.
Well, the poems of Robert Service are equally significant. I think the Robert Service poems, like the Shooting of Dan McGrew, they give a great feeling of loneliness and how people have dealt with it and what it's like to face challenges in their lives. And as a boy, when I used to listen to my father doing these, they were inspirational to me, because those were the days when on television and movies it was cowboys and Indians, as opposed to the Marvel comics that we see today, and the Superman. But the Shooting of Dan McGrew and the Cremation of Sam McGee are very, very powerful poems. And I remember somebody gave me a book once called the Ulster Reciter, and they're in that book, and as well as as much as the Ballad of William Bloat and things like that.
Yeah.
So there are many poems that are inspirational.
Mm-hmm. So a place that I would love to start, if you're happy enough starting, is you are a man of many successes, multiple interests, multiple talents. And I think if someone was to look at the bio that we'll read at the start of this interview, they'll kind of maybe would say, how on earth has one man done X, Y, and Z? But something that actually I found very, very helpful in our coffee that we had just before the interview a few weeks ago, you talked about the multi-story car park. And I already have found that very, very useful in my own life. And I think it would be a really great time for you to share that, and a great place for us to jump off from, if you would be so kind.
Yeah, I find in life, as I go through life, you face many challenges, and those challenges start when you're very young. There can be challenges at school, there can be exams, there can be how you get on with your peer groups, it can be as you approach examinations, it can be your challenges in sport, And I was, I don't know whether I was fortunate or unfortunate because I'm an only child, right? And so I have no brothers and no sisters, so I never had anybody to sort of use as a soundboard. And so I had to make all those decisions myself. And I found that if I didn't say very much or didn't do anything, people just would walk over you. And at the same time, when you did speak up and you did make your presence known, that people listened. And when I was at school, I also unfortunately had a stutter.
Really?
And I found that difficult, and that made me quite shy at school for a while. And that stutter and stammer at the time when we were actually asked to read in class, I hated it.
Yeah.
Oh, it was terrible. I hated it, but I found that because in the family, because of things like poetry and singing, which was big in our family, when I would sing or recite poetry, I didn't stammer and I didn't stutter. So it gave me, I realized that really everything really is between the ears. You've got to sort it out in your own head. And so as life has gone on and the different challenges that were there, it makes you look at other people and say, are they really better than me, or am I as good as them? Like in sport, when I was playing rugby or in sailing or whenever I was learning all of the various sports that I played, why is he better than me at that? And because I've got a head, 2 arms and 2 legs, and he's got a head, 2 arms and 2 legs, I should be every bit as good, if not better, than he is.
Yeah.
So again, it comes down to, I think, the mental strength. And mental strength is something I think you need as you're building business, and you face challenges, both in terms of business and indeed the family, because all families face challenges, whether it be small challenges or large challenges, or whether they be challenges that you have that you face in business life. I have a profound sense of justice, yet I have a deep distrust of authority.
Interesting.
So I have, and
formidable.
I find that I question everything, and I think it's right that we question everything. Like the girl there that was in the coffee shop, she questions everything, and I didn't know she had a PhD, for example, in ancient history, which I studied at A level.
Yeah.
But when I was talking to her, she was always a very intelligent girl, and I liked that, the fact that she's questioning how even the process of the coffee shop is worked. And to me, as I developed through business, I kept feeling that there's more and more pressures coming on, more and more things that you had to deal with. And if you let it all come in on top of you, you find yourself starting to collapse. So I created this thing, my own thing in my head called a car park at that time.
Okay.
And I would put the first thing into the car park, and really the first thing that really did that for me was the death of my father. He died when I was 25, and I felt that the world should stop, like that W.H. Auden poem, "Stop the Clocks," and like, my father's dead, like heavens above, the world has ended. So I had to park that. I had to put that into space in the car park, and then when I wanted to think about it, and pull it out, and then put it back in again. And that started just my thought process. So if I had challenges in work and challenges in business, you can't deal with everything at once. So you have to park that and come back to it when the time is right, while you have to deal with what you have in front of you at that particular moment in time. And except now it's a multi-story. Yeah. But yeah, that was the concept behind it.
And is that one possible explanation for how you're able to juggle being involved in multiple businesses and sharing this and sharing that? And is that a tactic that you've used?
Oh yes, it would be, because if you're going from one meeting to another, and one of the good things about the marketing business and advertising, you have a number of clients, and you deal with it. Each client they have their own targets and goals and issues that they have to deal with. And so you're coming out from talking to something to do with motor cars to next you're talking to somebody in the gas industry, you've got to just switch. You know, and if you can't switch, you'll be defeated. You've got to actually, and then you've got to talk sense. Or sometimes I think I'm talking sense. Probably most of my clients would say, no, he doesn't. You know. Yeah. But yeah, you try to. All you can do is do your best.
Yeah.
You know.
And tell me about, because this is something that I don't know about as much as I have, you know, researched and read the stuff and whatever. I don't know much about Colin pre-27, because you were 27 when you started the advertising business that then went on to become ASG Partners. But what about pre-27? What was it that got you into the advertising business? Early influences? Who were you working for? You know, tell us a bit about that.
I left. I'll go back to school days. I was at Regent House School in Newton Orange. I left there. I was head boy of the school. I think I was the dumbest head boy they've ever had. I got 3 A levels. Went to then the Ulster Polytechnic. Because I wanted to do a degree in business studies. I remember the headmaster saying to me, Colin, I really think you should stick with history. You have an opportunity, big opportunity in history. And ancient history was I really loved.
Wow.
But I said, no, I want to go to business. And universities in those days didn't do business studies. So I went to the Polytech, and I only stayed there 2 years. So I'm sort of, if you think I'm a success, I don't know whether I'm a success. I would say I'm an unqualified success as opposed to a qualified success. I left the Polytech. There was a particularly vicious terrorist incident happened to my then girlfriend and I, who's now my wife, and there was also the bomb at the Polytech in 1974. And that sort of ended my sort of views on further study. So I wondered what I would do, and I felt at that stage I'd been very much involved in dinghy sailing, so I was an RYA sailing instructor. So I decided I would try to do that.
Nice.
And I went to Killyleagh Sailing Centre, and I used to teach sailing. I got £40 a week.
Wow.
As a sailing instructor, and or was it £20 a week? I can't remember. It was something like that, and I got free bed and board for a while, and that was great. But I realised that wasn't the really what I wanted to do. So I applied for a job in the Belfast Telegraph. Oh wow. As a sales rep in the Belfast Telegraph, and I remember the interview to this day. I went into the interview with the then classified advertising manager, and I went in to him, and he said, "Tell me, Colin, why do you want to get into advertising?" To which I said, "Because I think it's easy." And he said, "Do you?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he says, "Well, I'll tell you what," he says, "just go out the door and come back in and sell me some advertising." Okay. So I said, okay. So I went out the door, and that was another little moment, because I remember to this day, just as I went out the door and closing the door behind me, saying, "What have you just done?" So I went out the door, and I went, and then I went, and he said, "Come in." And I came in the door, and he had his head down. He didn't even look up. He had his head down, and he said, "Yes, what is it?" And I said, "Hello, my name is Colin Anderson. I'm from the Belfast Telegraph." And he said, "Where?" I said, "The Belfast Telegraph." He said, "Get out." And I stood there, and he just kept his head down. And then he looked up, and I said, "It's easy then, is it?" And I said, "I know where I went wrong." And he said, "Oh, do you?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Where'd you go wrong?" I said, "I paused." And he said, "I should have continued." He said, "What should you have said?" And I said, "I should have said, my name's Colin Anderson. I'm from the Belfast Telegraph. I'm going to show you the biggest shop window in Northern Ireland." And he went, "Sit down."
Wow.
So, and after that, he offered me the job. And then I said no. I went and was a sailing instructor for 6 months. And then came back again and joined. I joined him in December. Those are the days when the Belfast Telegraph was circulating over 200,000 a year, a day. Circulation.
That's crazy.
Oh yeah, the changes in communication, my view is, if you do not really understand that you need to communicate, There's a great expression I use: you've got to tell it to sell it, right? And if you don't tell people what you want to sell, and especially not just what you want to sell, but how good it is or how relevant it is, you're never going to be a success. So you need to communicate. I think it was Bill Gates said if he was down to his last billion or whatever it is, or his last, what would he spend on? He said marketing. Wow. And I think that marketing is the most underrated part of our society in Northern Ireland and business life, business society, because here, unless you're an accountant, a lawyer, or you're into property, or you're a doctor or a dentist or something, the marketing profession is, I think, undervalued and underrated. But having said that, we have only ourselves to blame, because you've got to tell us how we don't tell anybody how good we are. So it's cyclical, you know. But yeah, it needs. We need to actually drill down a bit into our own ability to set our own profession.
Yeah. So let me put on my primary school glasses, and let me ask you, Mr. Anderson, what is marketing?
Communication. I see marketing embraces sales and embraces advertising, and the first rule of marketing is make it easy to buy. And that's really you've got to, whatever your product or service is, and we talk about product, price and promotion in marketing, but whatever you've got to sell, should even be yourself. You've got to decide if there's a partner that you wish to attract to yourself, you'll think about, am I looking good? What should I wear today? Yeah. How should my hair be?
Yeah.
I really want to talk to that person and make that person attractive to me, because I'm trying to sell myself. As you walk down the road and you look at all the cars, it's the car that you drive saying a statement about you, and that brings it into today's society about branding and where your brand is. And excuse me, in marketing we do a brand footprint. When we look at people, when you look at the brand of a brand footprint, most brands, if they're exciting or inspirational, they'll get greater want and greater money for them. For example, a Ferrari, as opposed to if it's carrying a reassuring in the brand footprint. So I find it fascinating, and I've always loved it, and it is one of the most. It's to the forefront of my mind all the time.
Yeah. Have you ever seen? I'm sure you get this question all the time. Have you ever seen or watched Mad Men?
You're going to be surprised by this. No.
Good.
I haven't watched it. Probably the 80s, when I started advertising. I started Anderson Advertising in 1982 when I was 27, and in those days, it was very different to what it is today. And I think that the changes from then to now have been huge. A bit like they say, the changes in the world in the past 150 years has been incredible. 150 years ago, we were in horse and cart,
so
and compared to the lifespan of mankind, and this last 150 years, and then the last 10 years has been even quicker with technology. And the need to embrace that technology. You can't resist change. Change is around you. I come and watch my grandchildren, and they used to play on Granddad's back, for riding a horse and all that sort of stuff. Now they're 5 and 6, and they're into computer games. And their granddad play this with me, and I'm going, holy God, and you have a go at it, but so you can't resist change. Change is around. So what we've got to do is embrace change as best we can. Going back to your point about Mad Men, in those days you were able to talk to people in government, you're able to talk to people in business, and you come forward with your ideas and your concepts and your strategy to take a brand forward, etc. Nowadays to go through, especially in government, there's government procurement. It's like doing the 11 plus. It's gone from doing the 11 plus to doing another degree paper.
Yeah.
So it's much more. What would the word be? Difficult, perhaps, and for something that shouldn't be difficult, but it's something that should be, because if you're communicating, it should be simple. But if you're spending public money, then it's got to be right. But if you're coming and talking about a brand and where a brand sits and where a brand goes, and how it's really sitting down, and you find that when you talk about the brand, is the brand consistent with the values that the audience believe it to be, and is that consistent with the values that the staff and the directors believe that it actually is?
Yeah.
So you find that research has a bigger role to play now than what it was in the mid-'80s. And so I haven't seen Mad Men, but I've heard many people talk about it, and I should see it, so maybe I'll watch it when I go back.
I told someone about this interview today, and they said, "Oh, you're sitting down with the Donald Draper of Belfast." And so I was curious to see if you even knew who Donald Draper was.
I haven't a clue who he is.
Maybe you shouldn't watch it. Maybe you would be either offended or feel too celebrated. We'll see. You can write us in after whenever you've watched it. Talk to me about 1982, 27-year-old Colin. You set up your advertising business. What did that actually look like? How did you go about getting your early clients? Was it the case of, were you really a startup, or did you come in and have a team immediately, or what was that experience?
I had at that time I was working for another advertising agency, and I had done pretty well with them.
Who were the big dogs before you showed up?
Big agencies. In those days would have been Armstrong Long Advertising, whom I worked with. It would have been, there was BPA Advertising, there was A.B. Brown Advertising, which is still around today, which was Val Brown and Patrick Wells at the time. There was GCAS, and there was... I just can't remember them all.
So, but
Lashbrook, I think.
Really there's two that have remained, right?
Probably, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yourself
probably.
and
A.B. Brown. GCAS, I think, morphed into Genesis a bit. But probably A.B. Brown and it was Anderson Advertising, that's ASG Partners. Yeah, we're still about. But they would have been the ones. But as I said earlier, you have your own goals and challenges, and that particular company had made me a promise. They'd said to me, I'd become a director. I was expecting them to make me a director, but they didn't do that. And I'm conscious I'm talking about this on air now, but at the time, it's a long time ago, but it's the truth. I went in one day to talk to them and basically resigned across the table. They thought I was opening up my own company at the time, and I hadn't actually intended doing that. And so I left, and I walked from University Street to McCausland Car Hire, hired a Ford Cortina, and drove from there to Bangor, where my wife was. And we had my daughter Kelly was just 2 years of age, and Kyle had just been born. And to say that I'd resigned and left, and with no income. So at that time, my view was then I'll start my own business. And I went and I said, if I sit on my backside here, nothing's going to happen. And I found premises in University Street, and I rented them, did a deal with a landlord, and then did a deal with a guy who I leased for the first time furniture. And I then went and signed up BT telephones, and my brother-in-law and I sat down and we created two rooms out of one to give me a sort of an office and a sort of presentation room with a reception room. In the other room, it was 2 rooms basically, and the other room was I had intended to be a study, or not a studio. And yeah, when I think back on it, the worst bit was once I'd got it all done, it took about a month to do that. The day that I went in and sat down and had the phone, I was dead silent. And I'm saying, what have you done? Because I'm sitting here with no employees, nothing. And I had to get on the phone knowing that the only thing that would get me paid any money would be to get the confidence of a client. Now, obviously, when I left Armstrong Long at the time, there were clients there who knew I had gone. And thankfully, one at that time, I'd been handling Maxall, the Maxall Film Wind promotion at that time. And Maxall, it was about after the first week. And I reached out to a number of those clients, and because I wasn't under any written agreement at that time, and I reached out to them, and they came and supported me, and so my first month's turnover was £15,000, which was a lot of money, a lot of money then, and that started me, and then I went and. I remember taking Tyrone Crystal. That wasn't part of Armstrong Long at the time. I remember winning that. I remember doing a deal with Pat Killen, the then head of Tyrone Crystal, and he said, hey, Colin, if you make the television commercial, if it works, I'll pay you. So I remember making another classical piece by Tyrone Crystal using Mozart's Eine kleine Nacht music at that time. And then Toyota came in, who was a client that I've been with Toyota, the Northern Ireland Toyota dealer network. They came in about September, and once that happened, the agency started to really develop. I was because I'd freelanced any work that I'd had, and one of the biggest issues was then there used to be the Advertising Agents Association in Northern Ireland, and they wouldn't recognise me, and they wouldn't recognise me as an agency, and you had to have recognition then from the media as well to place advertising, so they wouldn't recognise me. So I had to use a company in Dublin to place my media. Wow! And so that I could get some of that money back. So two things stand out in my head about that. First of all, is my first piece of advertising business from government was the Belfast Enterprise Zone. And I still have the letter to this day from the Advertising Agents Association, that was written to the Belfast Enterprise Zone saying that why were they giving the money to a Dublin agency, which was difficult because it wasn't. It was my agency, but they hadn't done their homework. And the Belfast Enterprise Zone stood by me. And the other thing that I remember was I was going 9 to 12 months, and the company that I was using in Dublin to place the advertising went into liquidation. And at that stage, I didn't know what liquidation meant. And so they went into liquidation. And I remember Ulster Television at the time, I owed them about £11,000 or £12,000. And going down to Ulster Television and saying, look, if you recognise me, I'll pay you. And that's how I got my recognition from Ulster Television. And if not, they would have to go to the liquidators. But that left me a battle with the liquidators because I owed them. They still said, sorry, your contract was with us. So I had a real battle with them. So that was character building. Wow. Yeah, it was character building at the time.
You went the long way around to get recognised.
Yeah, well, it was tough at that time. It certainly was because most of that money, it meant I took hardly any money out of the company, just enough to keep us alive, the family, at that time for about, it took 3 years to pay them off, the money. I think we owed them about 80 grand or something like that, but I had to pay them. So that was a long time ago now. So it's called the challenges of business. Had to park that a couple of times.
Yeah, I'm thinking like that car was red hot on that.
That's right, yeah. But people don't see that, People don't see it, don't understand some of the decisions that you have to make. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I was building a company and had a great team of people, and really, really committed people. And it was important that they were committed, and saw that I was as committed as they were, and I was. And had it not been for also the support of my wife, I think Hillary must think she thought I was off my head. But she has been a rock.
Mm.
Yeah.
Why do you think the business was able to survive the massive technological shift that you talked about earlier?
Because we embraced it. If you don't embrace it, if you try to resist it, you'll fail because things move on. It's like saying, it would be like me saying to you here now, and social media doesn't really exist. Like you'd be saying, yeah, bright guy.
Yeah.
So it's you've got to embrace it. But I think no matter what you do, I think the key thing is, Matt, is balance. You've got to have a balanced approach to everything. Should it be business or should it be your life? There are good people and bad people and everything. Like there's good businessmen and bad businessmen. There's good politicians and bad ones. Good policemen and bad policemen. There's good and bad. No matter good people and bad people, not everybody tells the truth. So you've got to say and look at everything that is brought in front of you. You've got to make your own assessment. And if you don't make your own assessment of those type of things, then you're weak. You've got to make your own assessment and stand by your own judgments and make a judgment call on it and then go for it. And that's what we've tried to do. And it's like when the first time I saw the internet working, this thing, it hit up my lusk. And it was Ray Douglas who took me out to see this thing. And I said, Ray, where are we going? And he said, I see this thing. It's called the World Wide Web. And I went, right. Is this a spider? Right. And so we went out to Mollusk, and there's a computer. And this guy plugged it in and it started to go. And I'm looking at this. But then, bingo, up comes the modem had worked, and all becomes, and I went, I said, wow. Now, in that second, I said, we got to be part of that. And that's when I started, just long after that, I started the Internet Business Limited, TIBUS. We started TIBUS in 1996. And it did, I put that into Hollywood House. Where I had my accounts team at that time, because by that stage I'd built Anderson House, which in the Hollywood Road. And then I built Hollywood House in Hollywood for the expansion of the company, and and all that was risk too.
Yeah.
Right, that was another few. That's when the car park started to get multi-story. And it was, but the internet business as it started, I remember, what I do remember was there was a journalist who rang me about 1998. It was 98 or 99, around about then, saying, I see you're in the top 100 millionaires in the Sunday Times list for internet millionaires. And I said, am I? He said, yeah. And I got the paper, and there it was. 7.5 million I was worth, according to that. And I said, wow. And I remember Hillary and I, at that stage, I was president of the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and we were in New York for a meeting, for certain meetings and things. And out there, I remember Merrill Lynch talking to me. Wow. And saying, and me saying, we were talking about the internet, and they loved the name, the Internet Business Limited. although the directors that I brought into it, they used the acronym TIBUS for that, but the Internet Business Limited, and they said, we can give you a valuation on that. We think it's actually worth more than that, Colin. We think it's worth probably around about 22 million.
Wow. And
I said, I'm going the back of my head, I said, you can have it now. Just give me the check, And so, Colin, look, when are you heading back? And I said, well, we're heading back tomorrow. And he said, look, maybe we could pop across and have a conversation with you in a few weeks' time. And I said, yeah, sure, trying to be very calm about it, And so I was saying to Hillary, wow, this is going to be good. I think it was on the way back in the plane, or was it with the following week, the internet bubble burst. And all internet stocks and everything went down the tube. And so Merlin's never came. They didn't come. I eventually sold the internet business to Ulster Television, UTV Media in 2008, I think it was, around about that. But that was unfortunately, they didn't give me 22 million. It was one of those moments that you say, wow, my wife has a great expression she introduced me to, we call a micro joy.
Okay.
And I think our life is full of little micro joys.
Okay.
And that was a wee micro joy because as you look at life, as you go forward in life, we've had difficult times, and we've just had the misfortune of my wife's sister died last week, and we buried her on Saturday, and that was really sad. And after a very long, difficult illness, but you got to pick yourself up. And my wife has done it remarkably well. She's picked herself up from that, but it doesn't mean she's forgotten it. It's you don't forget, and so you have little moments of micro joys throughout your life. Should it be somebody letting you out of your driveway into the road is a little micro joy to a little moment where you're being offered 22 million, you feel really good, and then you have a micro sad when it
sometimes a macro sad.
It didn't happen, but these things are interesting. You get on with it.
Yeah. So you mentioned TIBUS. We've talked about ASG and Partners. There's lots of other things to talk about. The final kind of string to the bow that I would just like to focus on, just really briefly, is B-Secur. And I would just love to hear the origin story, and then I'm going to switch gears and we're going to talk about kind of life lessons as such.
That'd be interesting. Yeah. B-Secur is interesting. My colleagues and I were sitting around in my office. We were having a sandwich at lunchtime. We were talking about something else, and at the time there was the death of little Holly and Jessica. I think their names were. There were two little girls were murdered in England, and they had Manchester United tops on. I think eventually the caretaker was convicted of the murder. And the parents didn't know where their children were. And around the office we were talking about, wouldn't it be great to know if you can know where your children were all the time? But the key thing being, not only know where they were, but it was them. It was it was actually them. This was in 2003, so this predates these mobile phones that you can track and all.
Yeah.
And you weren't able to take photographs and everything on mobile phones in those days. And at that time, my team we were working with Ulster University, and we were involved with different aspects of life in general. And I remember saying to the team, look, I tell you what, let's just look at this and see if we can do a bit of research into this to see if we can find a way in which we could do that. And I remember it was an amalgamation of ideas that came together. I remember one of the ones that came in was I remember visiting my uncle who was in hospital at the time, and he had a consultant was with him, and he had an EC his ECG was on the bed. And I said, well, you're alive then? And, to which he was great, and the consultant was there. And I said, how do you know it's his ECG? He says, his name's on it. And I said, well, his name's on it, but is there... but if his name isn't on it, how do you know it's his? And he said, well, everybody's got a different ECG. And that was, oh, right. So then my team, and it was Ray Douglas at the time, I gave him the authority to go ahead and research everything that he could about this, which Ray did very well at the time. And I remember we had a prototype which was done up in Coleraine, and we had the biggest issue was we were trying to develop a wrist-worn device. And the wrist-worn device had to amalgamate three signals. One was the GPS signal, so it could track you. One was a mobile phone signal, which I'll come to in a minute. And the third signal was your ECG. It had to be able to read your ECG with the view that it recorded your ECG. You registered the device when it went onto your wrist. If it was taken off your wrist, it would send an alert to a minder, to a parent, or to a monitoring station, and that would alert that the ECG, that the wrist-borne device had been taken off. We used to do demonstrations of this, and the GPS was able to track where it was. And the hardest thing was each signal fought with the other signal.
Okay, right.
So we had to really, and that's where the scientist boys came in, and they started to investigate this, whether this could be done. And that was the hardest thing of all. And I remember the very first prototype up in Coleraine University, up in Coleraine, Ulster University, was a shoebox with 3 bits as we walked around with it. But going from there to events, you got a prototype.
Okay.
And the prototype, you could set up what we called a geofence. So if we did a demonstration from Anderson House on Hollywood Road, we set up a geofence of about 100, 200 metres. And so if you walked and you broke that geofence, it sent an alert.
Wow.
At the same time, if the wristwatch was taken off, it sent an alert, and you could track to exactly where it happened. And that showed that, and the algorithm showed it was Colin Anderson wearing it and not Matt Thompson.
Crazy. Right.
So that's how it started. And I put investment into the patents, took out the patents for a wrist-worn device, and which is interesting at the minute with what's going on out there. And so we have the patents for a wrist-worn device with those 3 signals, and for development, and we took the patents out in that, and that's really started B-Secur in 2003. Couldn't get investment into it at that time. So in spite of doing the best we possibly could to get it, and so we did that for about 6-7 years and couldn't get investment. Then at the time I had other things going on in my life at that time that we had, because that was the early 2000s. I was chairman of the NI Northern Ireland Screen at that time. In our own business life, I was looking at what we were doing with TIBUS. At the same time, I had started a company called activitybreaks.com. When we'd just done a deal with Ryanair, and we mothballed B-Secur, because we couldn't get really anybody interested in it. So B-Secur came alive again about 2014.
Wow.
And because it's right in the tech zone. Yeah. And I met a great guy called Alan Foreman, and Alan and I hit it off straight away, and he was the previous managing director of Accenture Technical in the north of England, but come from Northern Ireland. And there's him and Adrian Condon and Ben of the guys who are leading that company at the moment. And we've just had about 10 million of investment so far, and it's looking, at the moment, it's very exciting as to where it goes next.
It's incredible. Persistence, eh?
Well, it's like Churchill, he says, never give in. Mm. Churchill would say, one of my favourite quotes, Winston Churchill, is never give in, never give in. And he goes, never, 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 never give in. But it's the way he qualifies it. He qualifies it in terms of either large or small or petty or something. I can't remember the quote exactly, except in convictions of honour and good sense. Mm. You know, you never give in, even if it's overwhelming odds. You keep at it, and I think that's a great mantra.
It's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have all these projects, all these businesses, and now in this season of your life, you started to step back. You've handed the mantle over. You have Val at ASG. Mm-hmm. You've got Alan at B-Secur. When did you start thinking about legacy building rather than boots on the ground?
That's probably the hardest question anybody's ever asked me, because I would say I haven't thought of that. I would say I haven't thought of that. I think Hilary has thought of it for me, and so yeah. You get to the stage where you realise that there's only so many hours in the day, and you have and also because of the change and the speed of change that is there. Thankfully, all of my team are brighter than me. They have really bright people and highly intelligent people, and they're very, very capable. And I think you've got to give people their head. If you don't give people their head and give them the opportunity to see what they can do, you can't stay and sort of say, at the age of 65 that you're still going to do it all the way you used to do it, because being brutal about it, that just doesn't happen. So, which is why I've always allowed things to grow the right way. And in B-Secur, I'm no longer on the board of B-Secur. I'm just a shareholder, because that team there are way ahead of me. The original idea has long been surpassed. They're up at medical grade algorithms, which are just awesome. Yeah, and they've done a fantastic job. And I go in there and I feel like I'm a child. you don't
put your trainers on and your hoodie and you go in to be a tech entrepreneur now?
No, not at all. No. The last time I was in there a couple of weeks ago, and they're showing me how they've developed this thing for surgeons, where they can actually, where surgeons would be training on an operation. And when they're training an operation, surgeons have got to remain calm as they can be. Certainly a little bit of stress, but we now have developed a prototype where they can practice, and we can read not only their heart rate but their stress level as well when they're under stress. And then we've got that into motor cars as well, and we have development contracts for certain motor car companies, whose names I really can't reveal at this stage, for motor car companies, just on terms of their ability to monitor stress for the driver. When they're under stress, are they not under stress? And that has implications for insurance and etc. So the whole thing is quite exciting. So coming back to your question, when did I realise that? When I realised I didn't really understand what I was doing. So these guys are way ahead of me. So I thought, it's time to give them their head. So, and Valerie and the team, Valerie and Emma and Vicky and Ashley are doing. Kirk guys are just excellent at ASG. And
was it challenging for you to let go?
Yeah, oh yeah, it is. It's it used to be every day I'd have a report, everybody asking this, everybody calling them in to do this, and Valerie as the chief executive, she'll do that now, and Alan obviously does what he does, and it is you look at the board meetings differently now, and you go to the board meetings and I'm looking at numbers, and accountants never really turned me on, but accountants at the same time, numbers speak, they do, and which is why I think a good entrepreneurial accountant is a rare find, and but there is a need to just look at what is going on in your business and the pace of change in that business, and say, right, are you prepared to enter that race again? And thankfully at the moment, I have a team who are, and certainly whether I am or not, at the moment, I'm there if they need me. If they don't need me, well then they say, right off into the sunset, Colin, maybe someday, but I haven't done that yet, I'm
going to share a question from Big Callum here, videographer Callum. We were talking about, Colin came in, what are you going to talk about today? And I said, well, I'm interested in talking about legacy. I'm interested in talking about all this other stuff. Colin's done a lot of things. And he said, here's a great question. I think this is the best question of the interview. So credit to you. What's left?
Huh?
What's left to do? You've done a lot. You've had a lot of success. You've built incredible things. What is there on the list that's left to do that you really want to get done?
Good question, Callum. Thank you. I would say probably just to finish it would be something I would like to see B-Secur finished and maybe realise its potential.
How do you qualify finish?
Well, as a businessman, probably realising value, selling it, or floating it, and realising the value and success, and having the global recognition that I think B-Secur deserves. And I think that would be an interesting moment. I also believe that on ASG, I think that I would love to see the team that are there take that on. And I think that is possibly a view that, but they've got to decide that. They know that it's open for them to decide. But there will be a time. It's running a company is different to when you actually got to put your hand in your pocket and own it. You know, because there's a different mindset there. Because it's called risk. You know, it's okay to receive a salary, and no matter what size the salary is, which is why I believe that the entrepreneur, if you like, is someone that should be embraced more. There's so many people who are successful, but they've been paid to be successful. They've been paid, they've had their salary through their lives, and they've worked in a company, or they've worked in a bigger company, or multinational, or they've come to be a chief executive of PLC earning zillions, but they've actually never done it themselves.
Yeah.
You know, they've never actually sat down and they've never sat in the office the way I had to sit in the office and say, what have I done? You know, I've got to go out here and feed my family. And they've never had that experience. So, and I think all successful people, really successful people, are the ones who've had to do it themselves. That's why I prefer that I'm an unqualified success, if you like, as opposed to a qualified success. And I think that whenever you take the risk, you really understand the drive that you need to make it work. So, which is not really answering your question, because it's just on B-Secur, because there's so many other things. But because I think success is happiness, right? I think if you're, or happiness is success. It's the other way around, actually. Happiness is success. So if you're, once you have all the loose ends tied up, then you can die happy. You know. What
makes you happy?
Probably the family.
Yeah.
Family and enjoying the things that we enjoy together, and that would make me happy. I like sport too. It was interesting just watching the outcome of a big rugby player in my day, and played a lot of rugby, and my family played rugby. I love watching my kids, who are all very talented in their own rights, in the singing profession, and I have my two grandchildren, which are fantastic. I really want to teach them a number of things too, if I'm allowed. you know, because granddad's inclined to do all things wrong. You know, but Granddad, you're really stupid. So they're. I think the family and is probably where I would like to be. Certainly, but happiness is really I think the goal that we all have. You know, because if you're happy, then everything else falls into place, because everything else has worked out for you. And I think that would be the goal.
Cool. Just going to switch gears here into the stock questions that we finish every interview with. The first one, it's a big one. What was the most successful moment of your life?
Oof. Now that's a harder question than the other one.
It is, yeah.
Probably the day Hillary said yes. Yeah, I think the day she said yes, I think was probably the most successful one, because.
What kind of odds were you walking into that with? Like, were you down on the one knee? Like, did that happen?
No, don't even ask me that, because in those days, in those days, the proposals and things like that weren't as extravagant as they are today. Yeah. I think my proposal was pathetic. It was sort of, if I buy you a ring, will you wear it? And I think that was it. And Hilary said yes. I think Hilary said, "What do you mean?" And so I had to then had to explain exactly what I meant, and so she said yes. So I think that was the big moment. I've had many of these maxi joys, if you like. I suppose I've had successes in the advertising business. I think the first time I went to the PANAI Awards in I think it was 83 or 85, and we won we cleaned up that year. We won the best at television, best press, and best outdoor at that time.
Wow.
That was really, I think it was 85. I made a television commercial, "Come On Northern Ireland, Come On," at that time, because and that really was great. Those days we had a great civil service. I think the civil service, by the way, are really underestimated in this country. They try to. These are guys who are there to do their best, and when we have lack of political leadership, they're in every day doing it. Now, sometimes civil service I would criticise because they don't work as hard as us and all that type of thing.
Yeah.
But the main guys there, the permanent secretaries and a lot of those teams, really do work hard to try to keep Northern Ireland together. Because if they didn't, I don't know where we would be at the minute. So hats off to them. But in those days, I remember making a television commercial, "Come On Northern Ireland, Come On," and and we won a lot of the awards at PANAI. But then I remember. When I was president of the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I had a series of political lunches at the time, and they were tough. I could tell you a lot of stories about that. I think got the OBE was a significant milestone, which was nice, and that was lovely recognition for what I had done at the time. I think taking the when I was asked to chair Northern Ireland Film and Television, it was actually the Northern Ireland Film Commission at the time, and it had a budget of less than £1 million a year, and we got £1 million from Arts Council, and that was it. And I was asked by the then Minister Michael McGimpsey to come in to chair the Northern Ireland Film Commission. And I said, well, if I can do with it what I want to do with it. And he said, well, let's see what you want to do with it. And so I went in and inherited a board, and I managed to bring in about 4 others, and it was a good board. And I said, right, we're here. I believe that Northern Ireland should be a centre of excellence for, I want to change the name to the Northern Ireland Film and Television Commission. And which then I changed again to NI Screen. And Richard Taylor was the then chief executive, and I then remember Richard left and employed Richard Williams. But before that, we put together a strategy to make Northern Ireland a centre of excellence for this sector, and I wanted £15 million, and we had a budget at that stage of less than 2, and the second million we had to go to the Arts Council to ask the Arts Council to give it to us.
Yeah.
So my first challenge was to get the money from the Arts Council to actually, so that we got it direct rather than having to go to the Arts Council, because what would happen would be a film production company would come to us and say, like, here's a good idea for a movie, and we say, yeah, we like that, and we would have our committee would approve that, but then that approval had to go to the Arts Council for them to approve it as well. So I had to remove that.
Yeah.
Either we're going to do the job or we're not going to do the job, and so and I have to say the Arts Council were very supportive of that, and we did that, and then I asked for 15 million based on a total business plan to take Northern Ireland forward, and they and it was Lord Putnam was the president or chairman at that time that I inherited, and he had itchy sort of feet, and I went to remember meeting Kenneth Branagh in a pub in London and asking him to be chair, and he said he would, because he went through the strategy with me. This is what we're going to do. And I put the strategy to government, and then government collapsed in about 2004 or 4 or something around about then. The government it collapsed because of some other political reason that I can't remember. And we didn't get any money. And I said, "Are you serious about this?" So I put together we wanted to have a lunch with, where I would outline the strategy for the film and television industry and say, this is the strategy. So we could say, this is what we do. This is the strategy to all the producers, all the independents. This is what we do. This is the strategy, but government will not give us the money. So whenever we can get the money to help you, then we'll go forward. But if we can't get it, we resign. So that was the intention, and the board had supported me in that. And about 2.5 weeks, we sent the invitations out about 3 weeks before it. And about 2.5 weeks, I got a call. And as I said to you earlier there about civil servants, some really good guys, and at that stage it was Bruce Robinson came in to see me. He was permanent secretary of the department. He said, "Where are you at, Colin?" And I knew Bruce from the days of IDB. And I told him and what we genuinely were trying to do. And he then said, "Right, leave it with me." And Bruce came back after going around it, and he and his team supported Northern Ireland Screen.
Wow.
And we got 9.9 million.
Amazing.
And I have a letter at home from Sir Alan Parker from the Northern Ireland the National Film Council, congratulating me on that, and it's a treasured letter, and because that really kick-started the industry here in Northern Ireland. We were able to do things and get up. I remember I took on Peter Johnson, the BBC. I'll tell you that I had my ups and downs with Mark Thompson at those days, because the BBC, I felt, should be putting more of their funding into Northern Ireland, so I had arguments there. And so it seemed to be quite a fight at that time to get it established. But some of the wonderful things that we did, like we brought movies here that Cocoon. We had Mickey Bo and Me, Terry Lone's wonderful movie. Then we had City of Ember, which was Tom Hanks' company, and then of course Closing the Ring, Lord Attenborough, and it was great meeting him and doing a couple of deals with him. So I think NI Screen gave me a great feeling that I think that we achieved a lot, and I personally felt that I had done a lot for the industry, because I do believe that Northern Ireland, we should be if you like, a specialist centre of excellence across the world. For each sector that we're in, we shouldn't doff the cap to anybody. We're a very independent nation. We really do believe in ourselves, and instead of sometimes fighting each other, we've actually got to say, look, we're better than everybody else, and let's prove it. And let's actually get behind new businesses. Let's get behind some of the great sectors that we have, the tech sector, the film sector, the health sector, and actually say, here we are. But we do need great change. Things like education. I do believe that separating children in early days in school is wrong. So that's a long-winded answer to what you asked me there. But certainly NI Screen give me a great, and probably the most emotional one of all was the tall ships in 1991. I was the lead consultant to bring the first tall ships here, and that was very successful. And the following year, we brought the biggest tall ship in the world, the the Sedov, the Russian ship, the Sedov, and that was at a very interesting historical time. It was the time of Glasnost, and when the land heads of Russia were going through this major issues that they had, and Sedov, that was Gorbachev and all of that, and the Sedov came to Belfast at our request on her own, and we paid for her to take some disadvantaged kids and young people out sailing, and to pay for that the following, we sailed them all into, we took them over to Larne, and then on the way back we had a corporate night where, and Toyota sponsored that at the time, and sponsored the vessel, and sponsored a corporate evening for guests who paid money, and that money went really to the ship. And there were people, government officials on board, and there was journalists on board, there was business people on board, etc. When we arrived back in the port of Belfast, it was about 11 o'clock at night, and standing on the quayside, I could see there was a man in the suit, and the harbour master, and the man in the suit was a lawyer. And when the set-off came in, she got all the guests off, and the lawyer and the harbour master came on board, and the set-off was arrested.
Oh no.
In Belfast. That was in 1992 or 93, and they were about to nail the writ to the mast because she hadn't paid, it was about £10,000 of the shipping agent's fees at the time. That had been owed by the Russian government because the Russian government had collapsed. And the skipper, I was in the skipper's cabin with a couple of government officials, and the lawyer said, "We're going to arrest the set-off." The man only spoke right. He didn't understand what was going on, but he knew it was serious. And it was £10,000, and 10,100 or something. I remember at that time there were tugs standing by, ready to turn this vessel around to take her to Murmansk. She was then to head to Murmansk, and we would have an international incident here.
Yeah.
The biggest tall ship in the world arrested in Belfast.
Oh,
and that would have been absolutely horrendous. I said, if I pay the money, will you accept my cheque, to the lawyer? He then phoned his client. He said, yes, they would. I phoned because government couldn't do that at that time. They couldn't turn around and stand over something like that. And one of my biggest joys was the fact that I did that. I got my financial director up out of his bed at that time. He drove into the agency, came back with a checkbook. I wrote the cheque, paid it to him, and the set-off was released.
Wow.
And away she went. And nobody knew anything about it to this day. To this day. And that's true. So, and did I get the money back? Yes, I did, in due course, through all the right channels. Yeah. But that was a maxi joy.
That's success.
And whenever she turned round and she gave me the 3 hoots, that was lovely.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
No, well, it's a big moment. I have to think about that, whether that goes, check the legalities of that, but it's true.
Wow.
So I have no issue with it.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Flip side, greatest challenge, and how were you able to overcome it?
Greatest challenge. In business life, greatest challenge was probably starting. Starting is always the greatest challenge, because once you're into it, you're up and running. It's making your mind up to make it happen. And if you want to make it happen, you've got to decide, right, I'm going to do it. And that's the greatest challenge all the time, of no matter what you're going to do, is actually starting, making the start. And making the start for Anderson Advertising at the time was probably the greatest challenge. After that, it becomes a little bit easier, and you're prepared to take the risk because you've done it before. So that would be probably, off the top of my head at the moment, the greatest challenge. I've had many, many challenges through the last number of years, but that starting was always the greatest one.
If you could take anyone from Northern Ireland out for coffee or dinner, dead or alive, who would you take? Or where would you take them?
I'd probably take them to the Yard in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's where I would normally go for coffee. Because every time I go there, they give me filtered coffee, which with my wife, and I'm not a great coffee drinker, but I think they run a great place there in the Ireland. It's great. It's great to sit down for a bit of camaraderie, and you can have there's a lot of people use it. The biggest question is who I would take, dead or alive, from Northern Ireland. Wow. I'd probably look back to in history. So would you take some of the people, like when you think, I think we can resolve all our problems by way of Northern. We can become the 51st state of the United States of America. We should have the 7th Fleet in Belfast Lough there, and we can Harlan Wolff can service it. We've more right to be the 51st state than more or less than Hawaii.
That's true. Yeah.
I think John Dunlap, he printed the American Declaration of Independence, and we created the American icon, the American Eagle. Davy Crockett's family his grandparents came from Oma.
Wow.
The Mellon family, the great financial institutions of the States, all came from Northern Ireland. Andrew Jackson, first Democratic president, came from Northern Ireland. Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon, his family came from Northern Ireland. So Sam Houston, you have the Alamo, and you have... So there's a huge connection between Northern Ireland and the United States. So I think we should be 51st state. So I'd probably bring back Andrew Jackson.
Yeah.
I'd like to have a good chat with him and see how he was a school teacher, wasn't he? And he then developed his first Democratic president of the United States. He would be an interesting guy to talk to. But maybe he doesn't qualify because he's actually born in the States. Other people from Northern Ireland, God, there's so many. That's a really hard question, Matt, and one if I thought about it, I would have prepared for it. but I didn't. Because of my, I would have, when I think of some of the great icons from Northern, like the guy who invented the ejector seat came from Northern Ireland.
Wow.
And for airplanes, and we have Harry Ferguson, 4-wheel drive. You have some of these people that Harry Ferguson was also into flight. I'd like to sit down and talk to him because he actually made decisions to do these things. So I'd probably go for someone like Harry Ferguson.
Cool.
Yeah, I'd like to meet and see where he came and how and what made him do it.
Brilliant. I've just one more question for you. That's the question we always end on, and that is, I'll modify it slightly. If we could go back in time to a little dinghy boat with, I don't know, say an 18-year-old version of Colin, and you had a couple of minutes of his time, what would you say to him?
I'd probably say to him, I'd probably recite Kipling's If to him, because I think that's very embracing. But I'd probably say something like, "Look, son, as you go forward, make sure that you're not overwhelmed by anything that comes your way. Believe in yourself. Make your decisions and stick by them. Make sure they're good decisions. If you're right, never back off. If you're uncertain, negotiate. If you're wrong, say you're wrong."
Thank you very much, Colin. Really appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you.
Class.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you.